I always like to be a little bit difficult, but I like to call it the X verse.
Uh-huh.
The X meaning a variable, in the sense that I think there's going to be multitudes of different shades and colors and views of it. I think there's going to be probably as many X verses as there are web pages today, maybe even more.
Mhm.
So you as a person might punch out, one day an X verse as quickly as you write a blog or something or make a podcast. So I feel like it is absolutely not going to be something dominated by one company. It's going to be highly fragmented. And I think if you look at the scale and speed that the underlying telecommunication networks are giving us, the massive computing power, the almost unlimited freedom, it feels like impossible for a company, other than to psychologically to convince you that they have a hold on it. It's this almost infinitely expanding set of things, like a fractal within fractals, that no one can own or control, because it's just going to be people's imaginations running wild across all kinds of networks that are getting faster, and computing's getting faster. So I like Xverse because a friend of mine and someone who worked at Magic Leap with me was Neil Stevenson. He coined metaverse in Snow Crash, and we spoke about it for a long time. And that book and his name for something was very specific. And I think what we're building and what people are building is not that specific thing he described. So I like the idea of just putting a variable, generic variable, so that every company could put, whatever your brand name is, something verse on it, just like a domain name. So I like the idea of Xverse or X verses describing the whole field, because it doesn't link you to a particular book or a particular idea, keeps it neutral, keeps it hyper scalable. I do think it is getting built and is a kind of nonlinear extension to today's web. I think there's no doubt about that. And today's web is really just connecting massive computing and phones and tablets and PCs and what we're doing now across Zoom. And I think what happens is we just move from that to different interfaces, so that computing no longer feels something that you hold in your hand or that you look at. It's just simply all around you. So I do like the idea of a spatial web is a nice way to describe what the Xverse will become. And we talked about that some years ago. And spatial computing is like one of the drivers of the spatial web. But I think when you think spatial web, you think this massive interconnected network of networks and system of systems all coming together. And I think the most profound thing that many people have not yet experienced is, what does it mean to be surrounded by compute, not looking at it? So living inside compute where it's everywhere and it has massive scale, not just like that it's powerful, but that instead of looking at a 15-inch screen, your compute takes over your neighborhood. Graphics, you could have characters that are 200 feet tall standing outside your house. Video games are not small things that you have in your hand. They have the scale of the whole planet. And I think we'll start to have planetary scale games and experiences that just feel massive. They feel like the real world. Because the real world has immense scale. It has like massive field of view and has amazing vistas and just things that like no television, no movie theater, no laptops can capture. Eventually, these sort of spatial web, spatial computing, Xverse things will give you that feeling. And I've had like little glimpses of that along the way. And when it all comes together, if you have some imagination, you can see where we are now and what it looks like, at the end of this decade. What does it look like in the 2030s? It should be just completely amazing. And I think the people who push it away as hype are, right on one level, because it's just like words flying around without a lot of meaning. But the people who really are in the core, who are building it, they know it's not hype. They know what they're building now. They know the next 2 or 3 generations, because all that R&D is going on. They've tasted what the 2030s will look like, and it's just unbelievable. So I think it's the problem I've always had is some of it is so amazing, so cool. People just think of it as a hype thing versus like, no, there's a really big vision and this is going to be utterly amazing. When you get the really, really good stuff. And one way I like to think about our journey there is like, we are in these stages, almost like going to the moon, which is like, the Mercury phase, Gemini, Apollo. I feel like we're still in the Mercury phase. Like we're past the Alan Shepard. Like we did the first person. Now we've orbited the Earth a little bit, but as an industry, we haven't left Mercury. I think we're near the end of Mercury. I think the middle of this decade to near the end of the decade will be Gemini, where we get close to the moon, where we circle, where we do spacewalks. And as we get to like maybe late 20s and into the 2030s, we will be what I would call like the real moon landing of X-verse, of spatial web. And people will feel like, oh my God, this is breathtaking. This is unbelievable. But you have to have that kind of view. You have to go along that journey and not be cynical to see what's coming.